Hi, I'm Mia, and welcome to our special interview series on trailblazing women. The women I've picked to feature in this series are carving new paths down roads that are, for the most part, new territory for females in the industry of photography. Lou Freeman is a top-notch fashion photographer with an insane client list. She shot for Harper's Bazaar, People, Ralph Lauren, and Target, among others. While Lou is extremely successful in making beautiful portraits of women, she has a really interesting career moment that caught my eye. Playboy is one of America's most widely circulated magazines of women. The images shot for it and the career space itself is largely dominated by men, an old boys network, so to speak. In 1988, Lou took a big risk and agreed to become the second woman ever to photograph for the men's magazine. Now, this interview is not really meant to showcase the content, but Lou's ability to break through a barrier and give women a voice in the work that portrayed them. And the lessons that she learned in the process can really be applied to all manners of photography and life. Lou, thank you for joining me so much, and thank you for agreeing to do this interview.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Let's start out by just telling me a little bit about how you got started in photography.
Well, photography was something that I did all through my high school years. I kind of fell into that almost by accident. I went to a boarding school called Rabun Gap in North Georgia, and someone asked me to come along and do some interviews of some people that had written amazing stories, and there was no one to take photography. And the next thing I knew, there was a camera in my hand. I took it upon myself after the photo shoot to go in and learn how to do the darkroom work, and I started doing my own processing of film. I was probably 15, I guess, at that point. And I did it for entertainment, and I loved meeting interesting people and trying to capture a little bit of their life. So the interest was there, I guess, from an early start.
So then did you go on to college to study photography?
Yes, I did. I went to the University of Georgia and I studied photography. But first, I went there with the intent on studying landscape architecture.
Well, that's very different.
Right. Well, it was basically an art-driven degree. I'd always liked plants and gardening and design work. And it was the only thing that had shown any kind of interest in my life growing up. And in the middle of that process, I was allowed to take a couple elective classes, and I took photography. And it took one class, and I was back at home talking to my family about the possibility of me changing my degree. And landscape architecture takes you 7 years to finish. And I thought, if I switch this now early on, it won't cost too much money in the process. So the next thing I knew, I was back at school. I was truly passionate about something. My mom told me for the first time in her life it was really neat to see passion in something that I wanted to do other than taking something on that would be nice to do. She wanted me to be excited about something. And that was when the pivot point for me was probably in the middle of that process.
So when you first started out, what were you photographing? What kind of subjects? Was it always people?
I was a master printer in school. Everything was in black and white. I built cameras from scratch of all different kinds. I even took a film canister and put a spool in the center and built a pinhole camera that had a ring around the outside that you could take images on a long strip of film and pull that out. So I kind of got into the whole architectural side of photography with the building and that. But I became a master printer, and about halfway through the college process, our class was allowed to start having real cameras. And I spent the next probably 2 years working with one single lens and one very simple camera, all on manual, when the world was turning to automatic cameras, program cameras, and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I picked up the camera with a little hesitation after all this art drive in the beginning, but it was mostly black and white back then.
But what were your subjects? What were you looking at through your lens?
I was finding anything from history that was intriguing to me. I've always been drawn to like old movies, black and white, talkies, that sort of thing. And my parents were 40 and 45 years old when I was born, so the photographs that I grew up looking at were pictures of their parents, and interesting like 1920s photographs. So I was already drawn to that type of look anyway. So I started recreating some of that, working with vintage clothes and that sort of style. But there was nobody around me that was inspiring me. I was just sort of coming up with these images to shoot on my own. And then slowly but surely, I was going to get into special effects, I felt, at some point.
And then, I mean, you were obviously bit by the fashion and glamour bug at some point, too.
Well, right after I graduated from college, I took some time trying to find a job. And I grew up in an environment where having insurance, having all those things that were part of having a job after you go to college was something that my family really wanted me to focus on. And I wanted to be a photographer and a designer and go out and, into the wilds, almost like a military photographer would, interview people and be more entrenched in meeting new people and finding about how other people live their lives. So I was very unhappy with the possibility of me having to take on like a real job and settle down and never leave the area that I grew up in. I wanted to live life to the fullest. So I started out my first assisting job. I met this gentleman that was like a full-time photographer for Coca-Cola. He was freelance based, but we started shooting advertisements and I started moving over into the people area. My first jobs after that on my own, I started shooting for magazines, and then magazine work turned into catalog work, and then suddenly I was working all the time. And I spent most of my time working in Miami, Atlanta, and New York, and going to LA and shooting for different magazines, doing small editorial pieces. And in the middle of that is when the Playboy thing plopped into my lap.
That's where I was thinking, because I mean, did you approach them? How did you end up shooting for them?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I never saw myself in that light.
It was never a goal for you?
No, it wasn't. And I was more interested in making all women look as beautiful as I possibly could. No matter what shape, size, form, what color hair they had. I loved fashion, and I was really challenged by being able to shoot the fashion in the fashion magazines. Not catalogs, not advertising like you might see in a Neiman Marcus ad or something, but more editorial. So my love was really there. So in my development stages, I was really focused on the eccentric lighting styles of a fashion photographer. And in the middle of the process, they came to Atlanta, Playboy Magazine did, to do a big photo shoot. And they contacted me because they had heard I had this really beautiful large studio. And they rented the studio from me for about 10 days, I would say. And I went away and shot another advertising campaign in North Carolina. And when I came back at the end of the weekend, they asked me, they were like, we had a great shoot, but we'd like to really sit down and talk to you. And I was like, all right. Do you have a portfolio you can prepare for us? We'd like to take it back to Chicago. We want to show your work. We think you have a really great eye for shooting women. And we just think it's awesome that you're a woman. And I was like, you're kidding. You would want me to do that type of photography? And they're like, well, we just think it's just amazing what you've achieved in the style that you create for women. So I was really kind of surprised, and I was kind of scared. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings in my family. I had just gotten married. I didn't want to offend my husband's family. I didn't want anybody.
You're from Georgia, right?
Yes.
I mean, so this is a conservative Southern state.
Yes, and I would say my family is really conservative. I've been the rebel for sure, but a rebel with a cause always. But when I started down this path, I think at first I thought everybody was going to say, no, don't make this decision. I had one friend that told me maybe not do that at this point. But everyone around me kind of asked me to really think about it. And the coolest thing that happened to me at this point in my life, I was probably 28. I can remember my mom looking at me saying, if you really want to do this, and you can see the value in it and it affecting your life in the bigger picture of your life, then you should do it. If you have one ounce of regret or fear about it, then I wouldn't do it at all. And I kind of, for the first time in my life, made the decision by myself. Both my husband and my mom kind of had the same kind of comments about it. So I went off by myself and I spent as long as I possibly could before they needed to know something, because they were trying to give me a 7-day booking, like right off the bat. And I got up Monday morning, picked up the phone, and I said, I'm going to do this. And I thought, I'll give it a week. I'll try that week-long process, and if I can get through it and I feel confident about it in the end, then I'll go along with it. And it ended up being probably the most inspiring, incredible, challenging, motivating thing I ever did in my entire career. molded and shaped it. The lighting that I would create for the future of all my photography. It taught me how to deal with beautiful people that have never been in front of the camera and always wondered if they could be beautiful. It taught me how to deal with light in all kinds of really cool locations that I would never have the opportunity to shoot in on my own. And the process of it, it was like nerve-wracking and stressful in the beginning, because I had looked at all the magazines and trying to get that glow and that beautiful tonality in the skin, and trying to understand that lighting without one of the actual art directors from the magazine telling me exactly what was expected was a real challenge. And when I look back over the body of work, when I went back to Playboy in the past couple of years to take a look at what they had in store for me in like the archives of what I did there as a photographer, it was really neat to watch how I changed and how the lighting changed and how the people looked more comfortable, and how it was like everything kind of birthed itself for me as a photographer. And I think sometimes in my life I can look back and I was moving stuff. I was through situations that I forgot to stop and smell the roses, if you will. And it was really neat. I saw myself develop, bud, and become a photographer truly in that process. And it wasn't in the beginning of my career. I'm going to say it was in the first third to a half of my career when I really started seeing myself become a better photographer. And it was so neat to be able to look back at it and see how I've used the lighting style and technique in so many other different ways.
Fashion and glamour photography really targets women. Playboy is aimed squarely at the male demographic. Did you find this challenging at all when you were developing concepts for shoots?
I can say overall that I probably learned more about life from the Playboy experience than I've learned from just about anything else I've come across. You can imagine what it must be like to meet so many women from all over the world, and their dream was to be in the pages of that magazine as if it validated them as being beautiful. And I listened to what they said to me, and I took it in, and I thought about my own self and how I grew up and what I thought was beautiful or sexy, or what my perception of what I thought men would want. And it was really kind of a study that not anybody in the world really gets to have. And I started realizing how much that meant to women, to know, to feel, to be beautiful, or to know that they are beautiful. And today I tell men adversely, if you only knew how much lingerie and jewelry and gifts meant to women and that you thought to give it to them, the world would be a different place within our personal lives, on a funny note. But I think that when I realized that my camera and my light and the hair and the makeup and the stylization of these shoots could really make such an amazing statement, and to be fearless with who we are, to be proud of who you are and what you look like, to feel like you've got it together is an amazing place to be. So every day when I'd go into these photo shoots, every time you can only imagine the variety of people I would meet and the challenges we would be faced with. I met people that had had horrible scars and horrible operations, and they'd overcome life and were living beyond their expectations. I met people that had come from really poor means and had paid for their law degree and were doing this as sort of a self-empowerment thing. So the stories were always wildly interesting and empowering even to me. So every day it was like, we're going to build a house today and it's going to be an amazing design, and what's going to be put inside would be these people. So the concepts of what we would come up with initially in the beginning were what was expected, I would say, from Playboy. The look, the feel, the poses, the typical things you would imagine. But the real artistry started developing for me when I could see my work starting to become like what they wanted. And then they started saying, well, we see your fashion work and your artwork and the stylizations of these sets. Can we try to do some of those things? They started asking me to shoot different kinds of film emulsions and let me try other kinds of experimental work, and then flying me all over the place to do so. That was probably the most exciting part of it, because then I could sit down just like I would a creative shoot I would do for myself and say, well, what can we do to make this uniquely different? What does this person have to offer? Are they a pilot for an airline company, or are they doing some sort of online skating across the United States. It might be something totally silly, and it might be something very creative. So those photo shoots were probably the most fun for me. And they always came out with really interesting results. We did a lot of things that were done silhouetted. I did a bunch of cross-processing back when that was big. And I thought I'd never imagine the day then that would be an opportunity for me to try. But from that point to now, what I got out of that whole experience was, as much as I was being creative for the fashion world, doing the avant-garde posing and the avant-garde lighting, extreme hair, I was able to do some of those very same things on almost normal people. So that's kind of like I bridged the gap, I guess, between both artistic styles of photography for me.
It sounds like you grew a lot as a photographer and a person.
It was really important when I was given the empowerment to make those decisions. I went from, am I doing the light the way they want it? Are the shots sexy enough? Do the poses that I'm asking the girls to do, do they look like they did them themselves? You know, when I got to the point where I was trying to make the person look like the whole entire concept was their idea and it was born from them, I realized I had sort of gotten to the point with the direction where I was on point. Everything started to change in my career at that point. I started getting more editorials in Europe. I started getting more jobs in the fashion industry here. Nobody cared about the fact that I had done the Playboy thing. It was never, ever a negative thing. You know, every once in a while you would say, well, I heard she shot for Playboy. But what ultimately happened is my photographs gained power by the way I was able to position the people and the way I could speak to people in this really calm way to get them to look like they were, 10 foot tall and bulletproof is the best way I can describe it,
So now, because you do talk about it now, you talk about the experience, you're probably always on guard a little bit. I imagine you have to have some kind of shield.
You know what, I look at...
I'm saying, do you expect the fire? Do you expect
Yes.
people to come at you about what you've done in a negative way?
Actually, no, not anymore. People look at me now and they're like, wow, you did that. You had the courage to make that step or do that when nobody else around you was doing it. And to be perfectly honest with you, when it was happening to me, I don't think I really realized I was the only person, the only woman. My name is actually Louise, and they asked me not to go by Lou and to go by Louise because they wanted it known I was a woman. All the publications that you find of me have Louise Freeman instead of Lou Freeman. And so I knew there was something going to be happening from it. And I just kept rolling with it and allowing the birthing of these it was like empowerment for me and encouragement for other people. And there is a couple of the subjects that I shot for Playboy that I am still close to today that have become good and strong movie stars. And it didn't hold them back. And I can say now that if I hadn't had that experience in my life, I wouldn't be the photographer I am today. I couldn't speak to people the way I do on set. I couldn't command the poses. I certainly wouldn't know enough about lighting. I probably would have stopped at a softbox or an umbrella instead of using all these multiple spotlights. And, the technical side of it is really where I'm at. I feel like I can make anything happen from that experience. And as far as mood and style of light goes now.
So you've been able to bring a fair amount of that into your work.
Oh, absolutely. I use some of the techniques of stylization of the light and across the board, all the way to shooting restaurants and food and everything. Same kind of pinpoint spotlighting.
So let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about your experience as a fashion and beauty photographer and how you stay relevant over such a wide range of corporate clients. I mean, your clients range from like Volkswagen to Spalding, from Hanes to, a variety, Target. How do you stay relevant to such a wide group of people?
My work in my life has been like 3 roller coasters that kind of join and flip around and careen around each other. And a lot of that was my doing because I guess I'm a true artist. I like lifestyle photography. I like the concept of relating my work to the masses so I can make a lot of money. So I want to shoot for Sears and Target and Coca-Cola and Marshalls and TJ Maxx and those companies because everybody buys those clothes. They're looking for spontaneity. They're looking for personality. I can deliver that same kind of passion in that style. And then I'll put that down and go over and shoot for Italian Harper's or for another hair ad. I have several Aveda hair care products where I've done all kind of avant-garde hair and makeup. I am so blown away by the mastery of hair and makeup and styling and wardrobe and set design and all of those things that I like to try to bring that into every aspect of what I do on that level. So I wear that out for a little bit, and then I'm back over to shooting cosmetic ads and hair color boxes and things like that. So my clients tell me that I think outside of the box, that I see a little differently than they're used to seeing. I take risks, and a lot of them want me to, today they're asking me to help them find a way to get on to the next block so that they can have a new vision for a client that they weren't expecting. Volkswagen and companies like that, there's crazy funny people to work for, and I love working for them because they always want me to do something really unusual and funny and personality driven, as well as have that little sparkle of color and design and style that I like. So my New York photography agents always wanted to take the higher end fashion things and represent me in that light, and they'd hand me back the portfolios that they didn't really understand. They wanted me to have one style. And I was like, great, you take this work, I'm taking this, I'm going to go to LA and go to other places and try to market myself. And I did all that so I could keep income streams rolling. Because, you know, fashion magazines would pay a small amount of money, catalogs were great, but I had to have that constant flux or I couldn't seem to make it all happen on the level that I wanted to.
When you go out on shoots like that, do you have kind of something that you, a look or something
Yes.
that you gravitate towards innately?
For me, it changes. I will study 6 months out ahead. I'm usually thinking about the ideas I'm doing a year from now, 6 months to a year from now.
Wow.
And I'm studying the poses. I know what the hair and makeup's going to be looking like at that time. I'm studying what kind of style of photography and the color might be in. What are the art directors looking for? Are they looking for an art photographer or do they want a fashion photographer? So I regenerate my own portfolios and my own style of work, and I keep re-putting it out there so that same art director doesn't know what they're going to see 2 times in a row. My agent in New York also told me that I could never show the same portfolio to the same client twice if I saw them 2 weeks from now. So I was always reevaluating and reconducting and re-putting things together and re-putting it out there to try to attract different clients. And I would do my homework. I would make sure I knew who I was going to see, what they were doing, what they were into, what they didn't like. And I finally got to the point where I stopped talking. As I've matured, I'd go in with a book and I'd lay it down on the table and let the art director see it, and then I'd empower them to tell me what they wanted. Instead of going in and going, hi, you know, I'm Lou Freeman and I've done all these things, because they kind of know that when you get there. You usually don't get into that little space to interview with these people. But
They might have looked you up before.
yes. So, you know, I've even had trends and times where I was shooting for Spalding and doing all kinds of golf clothes. I shot, you know, Tiger Woods and a couple of other Jack Nicklaus famous athletes. And that's all clothes oriented, but it would shift from women over to the men. You know, 2,000 golf shirts in a photo shoot at a time. So it was always a unique and different path.
So then do you get to do personal work?
What I do now is I take 2-week creative holidays. And I plan for those because I don't want any distraction. It's kind of really hard to like unplug from your life. You know, if you sit down and you write, I'm sure, and to find time where you're not being pulled or tugged by your family or responsibilities or what you're doing or not doing, or, you know, all the things that we all deal with in life, including making a living, sometimes you just have to stop. And as a photographer, for me to stop and just let some things happen for myself is when I really come up with the great ideas. And when I'm excited about those ideas that I'm about to shoot, and I shoot, the passion is there, everybody around me gets excited about it. And then I think following that time frame, that 6 weeks or so when I'm most excited about it, it's going to be a different kind of person that shows a portfolio to somebody that's perspective of working with me than if I pulled out a book I showed, you know, a couple years ago. So I just opened this new studio in Atlanta, and I pulled out all these portfolios I'd had over the past couple of years and had them laying all around the table. And I had people come by to see me this week, and they were all picking up these different books. And it was like almost like a unique person shot each and every one of the portfolios. And it's like,
Somebody
oh, well, that
totally
was the gray phase or the blue phase, you know. But
That's exciting, a new space to work in.
It is. You know, fashion kind of predicates that. You know, in the beginning, I used to be so upset when I would shoot a catalog and it was going to end up in the trash or the recycle bin. And I started trying to make the work so beautiful that it wouldn't be ever, that would never be the possibility of it.
Nobody could ever.
You know, don't toss it. You want to keep it.
So if I were to say, you have no limits on budget and you have no client demands, design your shoot. Like, what would be something that you would, because you've done so much, what would be something that you feel like you haven't done yet?
I think I would like to shoot all the live presidents that are still around. I'm intrigued by Jimmy Carter, the whole family, really. The people that I haven't met that intrigue me in my life, that have been inspiring to me.
Sounds good.
I'm constantly trying to get outside of my comfort zone even now.
Well, you said history is kind of something that's you're drawn to anyway.
From the beginning. And you know, it's kind of funny, my new studio is a block away from my first big studio. And I didn't really plan that. It's sort of all kind of circled back around to being in that spot. And I feel like I've gone around the world and I've come back to the center of the universe, sort of.
In Atlanta. Is that where you're from?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
So you're working on a class here for us at Kelby One on speed lighting for glamour, fashion, beauty. Can you tell us a little bit about the class?
What I did when I created this class was I started looking at things that would be inspiring to me to shoot for my next series of things I'd like to shoot. And what I'm going to do is teach about how to light and control the quality, color, and direction of light through all of the shoots we're going to do over the next 2 days. There's 4 segments. We're going to do an editorial fashion series that's going to basically start out as a dark palette, and we're going to bring light to it and bring kind of a sexy nighttime ambiance to that set. It'll have a 1970s feel. And then in the afternoon, we're going to do an editorial fashion story. Really simple, and just talk about how to move one light and make it into really interesting feel. So you can't tell that it's actually done with any kind of speed light whatsoever.
Interesting.
Highly stylized shots. And then the following day, we're going to be working outside on the beach. We're going to do 3 setups. In every scenario, we'll do 3 setups, beauty, fashion, 3/4 full length on each. And then by the end of the afternoon, we're going to do a Gatsby story.
Can't wait. Can't wait to see it. Lou, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and kind of taking us down your very unique path. You kind of carved a way out for women and broke some barriers that, I mean, there must have been people in your life that said you couldn't do it.
There's been those people all along, but every time someone has told me no, I couldn't imagine that there would be a reason why I couldn't. I've not been afraid of much in my life, and the biggest tip I can give everyone that wants to do this type of photography is learn your light. Once you learn how to move light, bend light, reshape it, reform it, and then learn your communication skills, there's no stopping you.
Well, Lou, thank you so much again for sharing your experience, and you should check out her class on Kelby One, or you can look at more of her work at loufreeman.com. Thanks for watching.